A major move in the race for Ohio governor. Ahead on Face the State, the state Republican Party throws its full weight behind Vivek Ramaswamy for governor. What the endorsement means symbolically and practically for him and the other Republican candidates in the race. Plus, still just one candidate on the Democratic side. Republican and Democratic strategists weigh in on where things stand with 1 year to go before the primary. Also, one-on-one with Ohio Democratic Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. Her stances on protecting funding for Medicaid and Head Start, President Trump's trip to the Middle East, the impact of tariffs, and pushing to put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Plus, if a grassroots group gets its way, you may not have to pay property taxes anymore in the not-too-distant future. Why they are pushing to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot, and why critics say abolishing property taxes is a bad idea. Face the State starts now. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. The primary election is still a full year away, but the race for Ohio governor saw some major developments recently. As we've reported on 10 TV News, the Ohio Republican Party voted to endorse Vivek Ramaswamy as the next governor of the state of Ohio. The endorsement comes very early in the gubernatorial primary cycle. Ramaswamy won the vote decisively. The party's state central committee voted 60-3 in favor of him. President Donald Trump has already endorsed the biotech entrepreneur and former presidential candidate as well. Right now, two other Republicans are running for governor, businesswoman Heather Hill and Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. On the day of the endorsement vote, Yost's campaign manager issued the following statement congratulating Ramaswamy and saying the Attorney General is going to take a few days to consult with supporters about the path forward. She went on to say Ohioans deserve a choice, not a premature coronation of an untested candidate. I checked with the campaign. A spokesperson said they have no new news to report at this time. Ohio Lieutenant Governor and former Ohio State football coach Jim Tressel is not ruling out a run for governor. In a statement, Tressel said he has not decided if he is running, but for now he is focused on helping Ohioans get off the sidelines and into the workforce. And at this time, former Ohio Department of Health Director Amy Acton is the only Democrat who has announced she's running for governor. Dr. Acton became well known for helping guide Ohioans through the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. Both she and Republican candidate Heather Hill have recently appeared as guests on Face the State. Joining me now to discuss the race are Democratic strategist Morgan Harper from Washington, D.C. I want to mention that Morgan is based here in Columbus but is in D.C. right now for work. And Republican strategist Ryan Stubenrausch is here in studio with me. Thank you both for joining me today. Well, let's
Thanks
start
for having us.
You're very welcome. Let's start with you, Ryan. I want to know, what are your thoughts right off the bat as far as the endorsement vote for Vivek Ramaswamy and how overwhelming it was?
Well, it certainly wasn't close. There was some talk ahead of time, some newspaper reports about Governor DeWine perhaps trying to slow down the endorsement process, but we also how that worked, 60-3. It's rather decisive. And so it's early. There's still a year. That's almost an eternity in the political world. However, an endorsement from Donald Trump plus an endorsement from the Ohio Republican Party is going to be a major obstacle for any person to ever overcome.
And talking about, the earliness of this, what does it mean for Ramaswamy both symbolically but also practically? What kind of resources does that give him?
Yeah, so the endorsement from the Ohio Republican Party comes with a lot of things. Obviously, there's staff help and things like that the Ohio Republican Party can provide, cheaper ways to send direct mail using the nonprofit stamp that the party has. But the most important thing, for the most part, is all of the slate cards we call, the little mailers that you get that say, hey, here's all the endorsed Republicans. Those get sent to Republican voters. That's the most likely communication that most people are going to look at. And obviously, we know who's going to be at the top of that.
And Morgan, I want to bring you in here. What do you think right now is the way things are shaping up on the Republican side of this and, the power that's building behind Ramaswamy?
I agree with Ryan. I mean, I think the 1-2 punch of a Donald Trump, well, actually 1-2-3 punch of Donald Trump endorsement, Donald Trump Jr.'s endorsement, and the Ohio Republican Party is quite a hurdle for anyone else to have to clear to try to really compete with Vivek Ramaswamy. And more than that, I mean, and this is something for us to pay attention to as Democrats. I think we also need to be wary of the messaging that's coming out of Vivek Ramaswamy's campaign. He's talking about whether or not we think it's true or it's a grift. He's talking about the future. He's talking about investing in children in Ohio. He's talking about making Ohio competitive, bringing people from other states to want to live here. And so I think it's going to be very important to focus on economic issues as we build out the opposition campaign here.
Ryan, on the Republican side now, Dave Yost is a strong candidate, but what does the endorsements mean for Ramaswamy in terms of what his campaign is? What do you think is going to happen there?
So Dave Yost has been in Ohio politics here for a long time. Served on his second term as Attorney General. He's raised a lot of money for this race, but he's smart enough to understand reality. And so we saw recent reports that he was considering an appointment from the Trump administration. The statement after the endorsement was not exactly a full-throated challenge, and so I don't know what Dave Yost is going to do. He's had a long and successful career. I'm sure whatever he does, he'll do it well. But between him or even Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel, if he wants to get in the race, it's getting late early here. Things
really
better
early.
get moving. Yeah.
Really early. Well, since you mentioned Tressel, is he still a wild card in this?
Yeah. No. Listen, Jim Tressel. I don't want to compare him to Donald Trump, but he's a non-political person up until just recently. They always had the nickname for him as Senator.
Right.
So, not quite Senator, but perhaps Governor Tressel, I'm sure sounds good to some. So he is very well known, not nearly as much as Donald Trump. And he certainly would have the ability to raise some money and garner a lot of support. And so that's the kind of candidate where it would be possible, but it's still an awful long shot, especially, without any formal announcement or campaign infrastructure just yet.
Like you said, we still have a full year before the primary. So, Morgan, how do you think Dr. Amy Acton's campaign is going so far at this time?
Well, before I get to that, I did just want to make one more point building off of Ryan. I mean, I think we have to also take into account the retaliatory nature of the political environment living in right now. Anyone who was going to make that decision to support someone like Jim Tressel is now not only going against Vivek Ramaswamy, but as we were just discussing, is going against the entire MAGA movement and Donald Trump movement. And I don't know that anyone's going to want to fully be on the record to do that, or there might be more limited support. Regarding, Amy Acton's campaign, look, I mean, we need to have a Democrat who's running, who is being honest about the state of affairs for the Democratic Party in Ohio. It is not a good one. And if we're going to have a shot at this thing, then we have to radically change how we are approaching these races, what we're talking about, and who we're presenting. And it's got to be an anti-establishment campaign. I think Vivek has the advantage of both having all of this backing of what now runs Republican politics nationally in Ohio, which is MAGA and Donald Trump, but he can also say that he is an anti-establishment guy, that he's not part of Washington, that he hasn't been part of traditional Republican politics in Ohio, which hasn't gone well for the average Ohioan, but he hasn't been that guy. And so, that puts him in a pretty advantageous spot narratively, I would say. And that's going to be something that Amy Acton's going to have to get a lot more aggressive about combating with a real populist message.
Do you expect other candidates to enter the race on the Democratic side?
It's hard to say. I mean, we're hearing a lot of speculation. I think Tim Ryan has now kind of gone on the record saying that he's considering it. And so we could see other people entering. But, given these dynamics on the Republican side, I would really caution that whoever is thinking about it should make a decision quickly so that we can sort this out and really start to rally the resources to mount a competitive campaign.
And Sherrod Brown, of course, the former longtime senator from Ohio, hasn't ruled anything out yet. Are you hearing anything in your circles about his potential plans, whether it be for governor or for senator?
Yeah, that's speculation that I've been hearing too. Impossible to speak for Senator Sherrod Brown's plans directly. But, what I'm hearing more than anything in my circles, which is really a lot of folks that are just doing the work of the party on the ground and organizing and beyond that, just organizing communities, regardless of if it's in a political context, is there's a real hunger for change. I mean, I think if we look at the local elections that happened, local primary elections that happened in Columbus recently, that about 60% of people were voting against the city council endorsed candidate. I mean, that is a sign of people wanting change from the typical Democratic way of doing things. And we shouldn't ignore that as we're thinking about some of the statewide strategy, because there is no path to a Democrat winning in Ohio without really running up the numbers in Franklin County.
What do you think about that, Ryan?
Well, a number of things she said there. Number one, I think Amy Acton, nothing to take away from her, but she's not winning this race for governor. An outsider might be a great shot, but a person with whom most people still associate a not so great experience in COVID, I don't think. I think Sherrod Brown or Tim Ryan, either one of those two are probably more likely to get into either the Senate or the governor race, or both between the two of them. But let's be honest, those two men are they lost the last two times statewide. And it's the third time around for the same election. And barring a significant change in Donald Trump's popularity, in the red nature of Ohio, it's going to turn out the same way here.
Is that one of the concerns, though, about the popularity of the president right now? Because it is so far out. He's doing a lot of stuff in his first 100 now plus days. That still has to play out. So are you watching that closely in terms of maybe the effects it has on the economy and support for him?
Yeah, something that Morgan said, the path for a Democrat to win in Ohio is right now closed. The only possible path to go back to 2006 is a terrible economy sliding into recession, massive unpopularity with Donald Trump, and after the president wins an election, the president's party usually loses in the midterm. Mm-hmm. And so that's the only hope that the Democrats have. Now, it's a year, it's a long time, but so far, we're not seeing that.
And that's actually not until the general election, so a year and a half even in terms of how that can all play out. Morgan, what do you think about that situation here that Ryan was just talking about?
I agree that that's a necessary part of the calculus here for a Democrat to really be competitive in this race, but I don't think it's sufficient. I think in addition, so if one, I don't wish that scenario happened for any of us, but it does appear that the president seems intent on very erratic economic policymaking that really is endangering the financial stability of the country and the average American. And if we do get to the point of having a significant downturn, something like a recession, I think that's the only thing that creates the opportunity for some folks to maybe move away from the president's support. I mean, some of the numbers we're seeing from Ohio independents right now seems to be tracking pretty closely with a lot of the tariff policy, kind of like adding support to that observation that it's probably going to be influenced by economics. But what I mean by necessary but not sufficient is, to take advantage of that opportunity, we also have to have a really strong campaign that's speaking to where the people of Ohio are at, and that we're presenting a vision for the future that people also want to buy into. Because another risk for us as Democrats that we've seen from these last few elections is that, yes, we have lost people who have moved to Donald Trump and Republican statewide candidates that have his support, but we also are losing people to just opting out of voting altogether. And what is going to motivate them to show up? And that requires an affirmative vision, again, for the future. And that's the kind of thing, like I said, I mean, even if we don't think it's true, even if we think it's a grift, Vivek is talking that language, and we have to be prepared to have a very strong counter vision.
And Ryan, we'll end with you, just 15 seconds left. Final thoughts on that spreading gap between Republican and Democratic voters here in Ohio.
Yeah, if Democrats over the last 5-10 years have moved considerably left, and to get through a Democratic primary, you have to believe and advocate for things that is not supported by the majority of Ohioans. And if that never changes, they'll never win again.
Ryan Stubenrausch here in studio with me, Morgan Harper on Zoom from Washington, D.C. Thank you both for being here today. Some very interesting perspective on the race for Ohio governor. All right, well, still ahead on Face the State, Ohio Congresswoman Joyce Beatty on some of the big issues of the day, including President Trump's recent trip to the Middle East. Also, she's keeping an eye on potential cuts to Medicaid and Head Start, how she says Democrats are pushing back on President Trump's agenda. Welcome back to Face the State. In recent weeks, Republican Senator Bernie Moreno and Republican Congressman Mike Carey have appeared as guests on Face the State. This week, I'm turning the focus to the other side of the aisle. I recently had a wide-ranging interview with 3rd District Congresswoman Democrat Joyce Beatty. We talked about President Trump's trip to the Middle East, tariffs, and a push to put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. We started with potential cuts to Medicaid and Head Start. The president and other Republicans have said that budget cuts will not impact Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Do you still have concerns that that will happen?
Oh, I definitely have concerns. As you probably know, Medicaid and Medicare, that comes under our Energy and Commerce Committee. And late into the night, through the night, They were in debating, Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other side. And here's what I know. If we take Medicaid, for example, and we look at almost 40% of our Ohioans are dependent on Medicaid. And I think it's important, Doug, for people to know we're talking about sick children. We're talking about the great work that happens right here at home at Nationwide Children. We're talking about what our major hospitals are doing. And then when you think about hospitals and healthcare nursing homes, they are also dependent to the tune of some 65%. Now, you tell me, when I'm sitting here in Washington and they're talking about cutting $800 billion out of that budget, I think it's ridiculous that anybody and any Republican that would try to tell with us what they're doing is not going to be harmful and we shouldn't worry. Then I want to hear them say this, and elections have consequences. The American people are not going to accept that. We had people with disabilities just yesterday that were turned away. They came all the way to Washington because they want to be heard. And I can tell you unequivocally and loud and clear, I am standing with the people. My colleagues, whether they are in Ohio or across this country, will hear from Democrats. We're fighting by communicating, telling the truth. We are litigating, and we are countering their legislation. So we're in the win.
Some pushback in response to reports that the president may eliminate funding for Head Start in his budget request. Do you think a cut is likely?
Well, we are again fighting tooth and nail against that. We know when you go back to the early 1960s when Head Start started, and you can look at the research to see that this program worked. Children were advanced when they went into schools, and we've tracked some of those children that went on to be great leaders. So again, they are making threats to Head Start. And, you know, when we look at it, it was in Project 2025. And here's what I need people to know. Most people understood that Project 2025 was harmful, and it was all about cutting hardworking American people. It was an attack on minority communities. It was an attack on how and what our children would do in school.
What do you make of the president's current trip to the Middle East and some of the deals he's announced, including the $600 billion investment deal with Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think it speaks for itself where it is, and it falls right into the thing of total control. You know, he has us up against a trade war when we look at what he's doing with his taxes and his tariffs. He meets with folks who have not been an ally to us. He's stirring the pot internationally. And so I think we should be concerned because this is all about corruption, all about corruption. He's brokering deals that will not set well with us and some of our allies.
The administration recently announced it will lower the tariffs on China from the 145% back to 30%, and China will reduce its from 125 to 10%. Do you think that's a good deal for America?
I don't know if not, because I don't know what to believe, but here's what I think happened. You know, China bit back. When Trump got out there and he was saying what he was going to do, he thought China would roll over. But what they did was they hit us hard. The American people started complaining because what it was doing to businesses. Just the other day, I was in a car dealership, and they were saying they're afraid of what's going to happen to their products. The beer and wine people came in and said they no longer from international places that they've traditionally ordered from, they're afraid because when they order it and what happens at the purchase of receiving it, at the point of receiving it, they don't know what they're going to be hit with. And so I think what has happened now, because China bit back, it caused Donald Trump and his cronies to then come up with the numbers that you just gave. We don't know what to believe because tomorrow it could be something different.
You've been very passionate about getting Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Where does that stand right now, and why is it so important to you?
I think it's important for a variety of reasons. There was a national survey of who should go on the $20 bill because, as you know, every decade or so they go through revamping, and it takes a long process with the security codes and the things that we would do. And throughout several administrations, even when Republicans were in control, it was decided that Harriet Tubman would be put on the $20 bill, or a like image of her would be put on one side of it. And as we've worked through Secretary Treasuries, through the Obama, the Biden, the Trump in 2017, everybody was on board with this. And so, as you probably witnessed in committee the other day, when I talked to the secretary, it was clear that he didn't even know what I was talking about. And that was very disappointing to me, because a commitment had been made that we should be in the final productions of this. And I think it's important for us to be able to say to America, and not only Black Americans, that this is something that will give us a greater sense of knowing in this wonderful country we live on. And we can also see us, and for my grandchildren and others coming up, I think it's important.
Well, still ahead on Face the State, pushing for a major shakeup in our state tax system, why a grassroots group wants to abolish property taxes, and how they're getting the people of Ohio involved. Plus, the key services critics say the move would hurt. How would you feel about not having to pay property taxes at all? An effort to abolish property taxes in Ohio took a big step forward. The State Ballot Board approved a grassroots group's petition for a proposed amendment to the state constitution. The group's leaders say they're frustrated state lawmakers haven't done more to lower property taxes, so they're taking their case to the people.
By a unanimous vote, the motion is approved, and the ballot board has approved this as one issue for the Ohio Constitution.
The Ohio Ballot Board voted unanimously to approve the straightforward initiative petition.
Well, we're certainly glad that we're going to move forward.
Brian Massey sits on the 5-member grassroots committee trying to get a constitutional amendment on the ballot for voters to decide. The proposed amendment would abolish taxes on real property and prohibit any future taxes on real property.
If we stayed on this path of ever increasing property taxes, we're going to price seniors and those living on fixed incomes out of their homes.
The Ohio Education Association strongly opposes the proposed amendment.
To eliminate property taxes would completely pull the rug out of the public schools and other public services all across the state.
Governor Mike DeWine says the state needs to address the situation of high and rising property taxes, but has reservations about this idea.
Well, I don't know how you abolish property tax completely without raising other taxes. I mean, this is a significant way that we fund our schools.
Massey says the group is not opposed to paying taxes, but wants property taxes to be shifted to other taxes or fees for services such as fire protection.
That's a question we've had a lot, and we said that there's really no problem in the state in generating revenue. The state has all sorts of opportunities, whether it's a sales tax, an income tax.
Property taxes are paid by more than just residential property owners. It's also paid by businesses all across the state. So eliminating property taxes immediately is going to shift the load to individual citizens.
The group now must collect more than 400,000 valid voter signatures by July 2nd to get the proposed amendment on the November ballot. Do you have the volunteers on the ground ready to go to do this?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Now, we'd like more.
Massey tells me if they don't make the November ballot, they'll try for next May. Thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30. Have a great day.